Today is my Christmas session. I was thinking of a topic that a lot of you requested, and that's about exploits. A lot of players in our community wanted me to talk about exploits. And as everyone who knows my sessions knows that I always work with a lot of solvers. I'm not the kind of guy who is doing this by feeling, I think we should do it that way, I think we should do it that way. I always have the solver background, and of course that you can expect this session from me as well. I've changed reactions from my opponents in the solver, so we have the output also from the solver. How would the optimal adjustment look like? And especially for the ones of you who don't use solvers, it might be a great opportunity to see how I am working with it, how I am successful with it at the highest stakes, and how I apply this part of the game. So what will this session be about? I already talked about it, adjustments, but there are three separate things that this session will be about. It's one, if we are the aggressor, what adjustments can we do based on our opponent's reactions? Then a strong factor is also, what about if we face aggression? For example, we are opening, we facing a free bet, and now it's back to us. But the same applies post-flop as well. So what about flop? If we face more big c-bet, or if the range that we face is a little bit stronger, how do we react against facing aggression? And yeah, as I wrote here, we will be covering pre-flop, flop, and turn. I think those three are very important streets to adjust. And now we get go. I have decided that the first spot we are doing together, and starting from the second one, you will be part of it. Meaning from every situation, starting the second spot, I will always ask you first, test you with the Kahoot quiz, and only then I will show the answer. But just for the first hand, we will be doing it together so that you already know like how it works. So what is the first situation we're looking at? First situation is 30 big blinds steep, small blind versus cutoff. So the first strategy here is our optimal strategy, small blind versus cutoff. And I also provided you with a picture below here, which shows what our opponent's reaction should be in an optimal environment. So at this point, we didn't change anything. So let's take a look. Small blind versus cutoff, 30 big blinds. Is there anything surprising? We have a mix of call, of raise, and free bet all in. The red and the purple might be a little bit hard to differentiate, but I think it will work. And I can also tell you what the difference is. So a lot of strong hands that are not that safe to play post flop, like pocket sevens, pocket eights, pocket nines. Those are the hands that we would like to just jam all in. And of course, our very strong value hands, the jacks plus, the suited ace x that also have very good post flop playability, ace jack suited plus, we are free betting for value. And then we are throwing in a lot of calls as well, of course. And on the bottom, you see the reaction from our opponent. The white is what he is supposed to fold, the green is what he is calling, and this purple color is what he is supposed to go 4-bet all in with. In the next step, I have changed the opponent's reaction. So now it's our job to pay attention on the details. What changed here? And I can see that there's a little bit less green. Can you spot that? So for example, if I look at the suited king X here, like the king 3 suited, the green one is gone. It's now white. King 4 suited, same. King 5 suited, the same. So a lot less calls in this area. Also king 6, king 7. Those hands, they are just lower frequency now, where they basically always defended before. Do we find other hands that changed? I can see some suited connectors, I think, are out. A little bit of 9-7 suited is out, 8-6 suited is out. But overall, it looks to me that I did not change his strategy too much. So if I don't change his strategy too much, if I just say, well, my opponent folds a little bit more, then I expect that my strategy also doesn't change too much. So as mentioned, right now, no quiz. I want you to get to know the rhythm of how we are doing things. And then from the second spot onwards, be assured that I'm gonna test you before we're gonna show any result. And for the first hand, the adjusted strategy looks like following. We now are aware of that our opponent is folding too much, and immediately I can see more red in here. What about ace 4, ace 5? Take a look, guys, at the offsuited ace here. Ace 4 added, ace 5 higher frequency, ace 7 offsuit added, ace 8 now full frequency. So that seems to be the prime candidate that it wants to target if my opponent folds too much. It just goes for adding more ace hand. Ace 4, ace 5, ace 7, ace 8. Have in mind, now we are at 30 big blinds deep. Potentially, if you would be deeper, let's say 60 big blinds, 80 big blinds, 100 big blinds deep, the ace x hand is a risky one because the post flop playability playability is not that great. So maybe if you're deeper, instead of the a6, you would like to add more suited connector type hands. But definitely at 30 big blinds, the ace is a great blocker to prevent that our opponent is having a hand that he could go all in with. So at this stack size, the ace is really the good candidate to adjust. Ace 4, ace 5, ace 7, ace 8. So I think now that you understand the rhythm of how things are working, we are going right away to hand number 2, where I am going to challenge you. So let's see what I have prepared next. This spot is deeper now. We are 60 big blinds deep. This time we're in the button and our opponent is the low jack. I would say first again we get comfortable what is like the default strategy, and then I'm gonna challenge you about the changes strategy. 60 big blinds deep, button versus the low jack. We wanna use the advantage of being the button, always acting last, being in position. Of course, we're going to call a lot. That's why we see a lot of green, and then there is some red mixed in, of course. Our strongest hands, they want to go for value, and then we are mixing in some suited connectors, some weaker hands, jack 8 suited, jack 9 suited, ace jack off suited, but we can already see 60 big blinds deep, it's more playable hands, right? You don't see the kind of ace 7, ace 8 offsuited hands that often. And our opponent's reaction, what is his reaction? Suited broadways, of course he wants to play against our free bet. The strongest hands he wants to go a 4-bet with, and then the suited connectors and all those hands, they're very, very close against our free bet. Sometimes he can call them, but sometimes he has to fold them. It's like, it's right in the middle of like, can he defend them? Can he not defend them? And what I said now, I decided, okay, you are facing an opponent who is never gonna fold a suited connector. You are facing an opponent who is never going to fold ace jack off suited, who is never going to fold a suited ace. So that's the reaction that I forced your opponent to play, because I think there are really a lot of players who like to see flops, and they would never fold 10-8 suited. You can see all green here. They would never fold a pocket pair, pocket freeze. That's why it's all green. They would never fold ace jack or even ace 10. They would really like to see a flop. And the same change I applied here with queen 9 suited, jack 9 suited, or the suited a6. So you can see a lot more calling, a lot more sticky, and now it's up to you. I'm gonna challenge you now. What do you think is your adjustment? What does the optimal adjustment look like if your opponent is calling way too much here? And that's why we're gonna start up the first Kahoot quiz. I'm happy 17 of you in, so this is the last chance now to join, giving you like 30 seconds, then you can be part from the start with the Kahoot, and then we kick off the first question. 3, 2, 1. I want to know, what adjustment do you expect? Do you expect little change in strategy, a 2% change in the free bet frequency, or a very significant change in adjustment? Time is short. 5, 4, 3. You need to be very quick. 2, 1. Okay, this was a very, very tricky one, because a lot of you expected 2%, but the most of you expected a significant change in strategy. And I like the outcome to be like this, to be honest. I like it when all of you are wrong. Why? Because that can mean that the learning effect from this session for all of you will be bigger. If you're now making a mistake, which I can correct and tell you the correct thought process, then I'm very happy that I'm getting you on the right way. So let's talk about it. What is the reason that the change in strategy is so little here? If you look at the picture on the left and the picture on the right, you will hardly be able to spot a difference. It's extremely small difference in strategy. Let's try to find a hand actually that changed. I can find king 10 offsuited. Originally it was free betting a little bit, and it's not doing it anymore. But king 9 suited, you guys in the chat are saying, and that's correct. Oh, king 9 suited is now free betting more actually. What about other hands that stopped free betting? I can see that 7-6 suited reduced a little bit, but you can already see it's extremely hard to spot anything. And that is already the first takeaway. If we have still a lot of action behind us, then we can never make strong adjustments. So if you are in the button, if you are in the cutoff, and you know there's one guy who opened who folds a little bit too much, that does not enable you just go bananas and just go out of line now. There's still the small blind left to act, there's still the big blind left to act. And just because he folds a little bit more here, it just does not justify a very significant change in strategy. It would be different if you're the big blind. If you're basically the last player to act, for sure you can now make a stronger adjustment. And I think this is already the first important takeaway. whenever it's about adjusting, think about it. Do you close the action? Are you the very last person to act? Or is there still a lot of room that there is something happening behind you? And that's really a key factor that you always need to have in mind. And I think with that information, we can already go to the next hand. I will read the chat, of course. Deep into Mortar says, we assume blinds to squeeze aggressively enough here. So the thing is, if you start to 3-bet more in the button, then in theory, the blinds should also go even more aggressive against you. But I did not select that the way I made the sim. I said that the small blind and the big blind reaction, it just stays static. They don't change anything, just because I go loser. But we can still see that the change in our button strategy is very little. And Chucky Feeney says he can identify more free bets with suited hands and a little bit less free bets with offsuited hands, and I think that makes total sense what you figured out here. If you know you get called all the time, then you prefer playable hands, and of course suited hands have better playability than offsuited hands, so that's a good summary of you for sure. Let's go to the next hand, and the next hand is a flop decision. Let's see what awaits us. Flop decision. Okay, what is the scenario here? We are 30 big blinds deep, we are playing button versus the big blind. I have picked this spot on purpose because it happens all the time, and I think for us it's way more important to look something that you encounter every single day you play poker compared to some very rare scenarios where we could make some insane adjustments that basically never happen anyway. So we are focusing on the relevant, and button versus big blind on a dry flop, it really happens all day long, doesn't matter what format you're playing. So what I allowed in the solver is I allowed two sizes. The solver is allowed to bet small, is allowed to bet big, and of course he's allowed to check back. And what is the strategy the solver likes here? The solver says, well, we have the stronger range in the button, and that's why we want to c-bet a lot. The board is very dry, there's no reason to go too big, we just want to c-bet often, and we want to use a small size. Let's take a look at our opponent's reaction. I think what we can immediately see is a lot of red. A lot of red means a lot of check raise, and that's already the thing which is not happening this way in reality. Take a look at some of the hands that are red here. What about Jack 6 suited, guys? Be honest, would you check raise a hand like this? What about 5-2 suited? I mean, it's basically nothing. Okay, I mean, you have the very optimistic backdoor straight, but you still only have 5-2 suited. We cannot consider this a strong hand. Then I can see some other very optimistic hands. What about 10-5 suited? I mean, again, yeah, you can make backdoors and so, but you don't even have the overcut. But definitely some extremely aggressive check raises where I really doubt that any of your opponent would find them with that frequency. And that's the change that I made here. I said what I think is more realistic that we face is that opponents would never find this 5-2s. This is a hand, it's very unnatural to find it. And hands like the bluffs here, Jack 6 suited, 10-6 suited, I said occasionally he can check raise them with, but as you can see it's a lot less red. Jack 5 is out, 10-5 is out, Jack 6, 10-6 has a little bit of red. So I just reduced the aggression. This is not the aggression that you will face in-game. And now I'm going to challenge you. What do you think is our adjustment if our opponent is not finding enough check raises? And that's the Kahoot question number 2. What's the right adjustment? Either you check more often, you use more often the big c-bet, you just c-bet with a higher frequency, or no strategy change. Now you don't have that much of a rush, you still have 10 seconds left. I can already see someone writing blue. Use more often the big size, some yellow. And a lot of you found it here, got it right. You say, if our opponent is not check raising enough, our reaction is that we want to c-bet with a higher frequency.